Hey y'all, it has finally quit raining out here in the hills of North Georgia for a couple of days, and I'm going to take this time to handle a little repair project on my 1954 Lincoln short hood welder that's mounted on my service truck here. It's got a cracked exhaust manifold, which is also the intake. It's made together, an intake and exhaust manifold. So we're going to take that old one off. We're going to get the new one set up and put on here, and I'm also going to do a video on rebuilding the I think it's a Marvel Shibler carburetor that's on it, and I'll put the link down there in the description for how to rebuild those carburetors. All right, y'all can see the crack that's right there. That when I first got this machine, I actually couldn't find a manifold for it, and so I just patched it back together, and that patch didn't last too awfully long. I mean, it's been on there a couple of years, but I've got a brand new manifold, and so we're gonna pull this old manifold off here and get the new one set up and on there and rebuild the old carburetor. Stay tuned. Okay, and there she is without her clothes on. There's 4 little J-bolts here that hold the hood on these short hoods, and so they're actually kind of a pain to get to, but anyhow, we got them. And there's our manifold with a big crack in it, and there's a big hole actually on the back side of it here. Let's see if I can get it shaded where you can see it. And so that's the main reason we're trying to fix this, is because that crack goes all the way across, and then there's a big hole on the back side of it. So now we're going to start taking off all the linkage for the carburetor and the fuel lines and the vacuum line that goes to the idler there, because I've never put the electronic idler on this machine, and probably won't, because it still works pretty decent just like it is. So anyhow, we're going to go ahead and take all the filter and carburetor and all that off and get it ready to pull the manifold. Okay, we've got our intake off of there now, and there's actually, from that crack, because it's been raining like the devil, we've actually gotten a little bit of water in where the manifold was, so we're going to kind of just clean all that up a little bit, and going to take a razor blade here and clean up everything where the old gasket was. All this needs to be as clean as you can get it, free of any of the old gasket material, which that gasket come off pretty clean. Okay, here's our old intake off of the machine, and right here there was a big crack and a hole up under it. That crack goes all the way around. There's not really anything left of this manifold, it's just all burnt out. There's another crack over here, and this crack was actually allowing water to get down in this part of the manifold here, and you can see a little bit of the rust in here. So we're getting this taken care of just in the nick of time, probably. And here's the old Marvel Shibler carburetor that was on there that we're going to carry out to the shop and rebuild, and we're going to take it apart and let it set in some carb cleaner overnight. I've got a carburetor kit ready to go back in it, and I'll get some video of doing all of that, and we're going to put a link to that video in the description. Okay, here's our 2 manifolds together for comparison. The new manifold is actually for a tractor engine. The engines on these SA200 welders are either going to be an F162 or an F163 Continental. And I think way back when, some of the really old ones used either a Waukesha or a Hercules engine. But anyway, most of them that you will ever run across will be an F162 or 163. So this one, of course, was made for the welder. This one was made for a tractor. And one of the biggest differences is you will see where there's a vacuum hole drilled here on the welder, and it's at the bottom on the one for the tractor. Well, this being right here, if we use this port, it'll interfere with the linkage for the carburetor, which is down here. So we're going to drill and tap this one and plug this one so that it'll be the same as what came off of it here. Okay, so we're going to be drilling and tapping this blank spot here for a 1/8 NPT fitting to hook up the vacuum line for the idler on this welder, and also plugging off this hole, but we're just going to put a brass plug in it. Now, the decimal chart says that ultimately we need a size D drill to, or the tap chart to fit this 1/8 NPT plug tap there. So we're going to start off by center punching our manifold here. And I wouldn't hit this too hard because it is cast and you don't want to break it. And it doesn't have to be perfectly centered, but we'll drill this out, tap it, and plug this, and then start putting it on. Okay, you want to make sure that your drill speed is set as slow as it possibly can be. You want to use some good sharp bits and a little cutting oil. Start out with a really small bit and work our way up. You always want to keep plenty of oil on it. Now, right before it punches through, I want to clean all the bits of metal off of it there. Just clean them off of our drill bit too. Now we're just going to go up progressively larger bits until we get to the right size for the for our tap that we're going to use. Okay, we've got our hole drilled out to the right size, and now we're going to tap it. And I have no earthly idea where my dadgum tap handles have got off to, so we're going to do this kind of the cheating way with an adjustable wrench. And I really do not recommend doing this that way. It's real easy to break a tap, and it's real easy to get your hole off kilter too, your threads. But that's what I've got to work with today while I'm making y'all this video. And this hole is not really that critical. If this was something where you really had to have a good seal, I definitely wouldn't do it this way. Okay, after we get done drilling and tapping this, before we install the fittings on it permanently, we want to make really sure that we take some compressed air and blow all the chips and dust and oil and junk out of it so we don't get any of that in our engine. Alright y'all, we're ready to start putting this thing back together. We got a couple of good coats of extreme high temp black enamel on the manifold, and that's probably still going to burn off anyway, and it'll be rusty in 6 months, but hey, at least we tried. The intake and exhaust manifold are it's one piece, so it uses the same gasket, so you don't want to use any kind of like RTV or silicone or anything like that on it. Here is the part number if anybody needs it. And we're going to open this up and get started. All right, we've got our gasket on here, and again, you don't need any kind of stickum to go on it. And because of that oil pressure gauge, we gotta kind of twist this one into place. Maybe it was. There we go. Now, that one bolt right there is a larger size than the rest of them. Okay, we've got our manifold back on here. Everything's torqued down. It does have an actual torque spec, but I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. So on stuff like this, comfortably tight's what I like to say. Don't strip it. If you're one of those people that tighten stuff down till it strips pretty regular, go to whenever you think it's tight, stop 2 turns before you get there. All right, now we're going to put on the carburetor, and here it is. We got a new gasket on here, and I don't like to put any stick them on these gaskets either, because you do have to take them off sometimes when you're cleaning the carb back out or something like that. And also on these updraft carburetors, when you get them, oh, come on. There we go. Sometimes when you go to put these back on, there's not enough room between here and here once you've mashed the carburetor all the way up to get the nut started. It looks like there is on this one, but most of the time I just barely get one started and then get the other one started. Here's our vacuum line that we had to re-drill and tap our hole for. Fuel line. Most of the time you don't get that lucky with metal fuel lines. They don't always. 5/8. Well, said it was a 5/8. Well, it's a 9/16. It's just really tight. Alrighty. Okay, this is the part right here where I thought that this fitting being down here at this port would give us a problem, but it looks like it might not have. But I didn't really want to find that out after I put this thing totally back together. Now, on these right here, whenever you go to take one of these off, you slide the little sleeve backwards. Just take your screwdriver and knock it backwards and it'll come off. Whenever you get ready to put it back on, you just slide it up like that. All right, let's go ahead and turn our gas back on. And screw this piece of exhaust pipe down in here, which is absolutely not long enough to go through the hood. So we'll get another piece. All right, let's see what happens. The battery might be dead.